Now, many nutritionists have felt that animal protein is the ideal protein for man. How did all that start? Back in the early 1900s, Osborn and Mendel, early investigators, were working with rats, and they wanted to see what foods make rats grow best and grow fastest. And they found very soon that cheeses, dairy foods, eggs, and so on were very good for rats, but vegetable proteins didn't do too well. And so they started what they call a PER system, protein efficiency ratio. And they rated the foods. For example, egg was 94%. Well, that's almost 100% efficient. Cheeses, dairy products, meats, and fish were very high, 90 or 100%. Potatoes, only 67%. Beans and peas, only 42%. And in the early 1920s, as the investigations proceeded, the investigators said there must be something wrong with vegetable foods. There must be something incomplete compared to animal foods because they don't let rats grow too well. And the term incomplete has been widely misunderstood by present-day nutritionists and dietitians. Present-day nutritionists and dietitians seem to think that the word incomplete means not all the amino acids. It's not a complete protein. That's completely untrue, because when the term was first used, we didn't even know how to analyze for all the amino acids. When they said incomplete, they meant that there's something mysteriously missing because they don't make rats grow as fast as the animal proteins. And that, unfortunately, has stayed in the literature, the nutritional and dietetic literature, and so that many nutritionists, many dietitians are treating their patients like rats. They're referring them and recommending the rat diets instead of giving them human diets. Because when we talk about human diets, it's much different than the rat diets. For example, when we first started testing with humans to see the difference between vegetable and animal proteins, we get rather surprised. Dr. Knapp, for example, in this Corpus Christi hospital, treated young infants, 5 to 14 months old, on two different diets. One was a diet primarily vegetable proteins, and the other was primarily a milk diet. And he found it didn't make any difference to these infants. They both grew just as well as each other as long as they got the same amount of calories. In fact, not only was there no difference in what we call nitrogen retention, that is the amount of protein retained for growth and so on, and no difference in growth rates, but the children actually did better on the vegetable proteins compared to the milk proteins. Children were studied in India by Dr. Reddy. These children were 2 to 5 years old, and he was worried about giving them wheat because in animal studies, wheat has a different amino acid composition and percentage than egg. And since egg is considered as the ideal protein by many because it works so well with rats, that we try to model all foods after the pattern of egg, and if the amino acid composition of other foods are not similar to egg, we think that it's inferior. Now, one amino acid called lysine is only half the quantity, half the percentage in wheat as it is in egg. So what Dr. Reddy did was to double the lysine content by adding it to the wheat diets to make it equivalent to egg, to see if that helps children grow, because it does help animals grow. And after experimenting with these children, 2 to 5 years old, he found no difference at all in growth as long as they had enough calories. So that didn't work out. Now, if you feed rats rice, plain rice, they hardly grow at all. But if you feed them rice and just add 1% chicken, the rats do pretty well. So Dr. Lee at Purdue University decided to take 20-year-old young men and see what happens to humans when you feed them rice diets. And he fed one group 100% rice, and the other group had 15% chicken and 85% rice. Let's see what happened. After a period of many weeks, when he checked them out again, he found that those on the rice alone retained about 20% more protein than those on the rice and 15% chicken. It was a real surprise. And yet the amount of rice that was used was only about 6 or 7% of total calories, 1/3 of what the average American eats. And that was plenty for these 20-year-old young active people. And more than that, the rice wasn't even worth eating. It was plain white starchy rice, All the minerals taken out, all the vitamins taken out, and all the dietary fiber taken out. Hardly worth eating, and yet the protein in rice was superior to that in rice and chicken. Now, humans are somewhat different than rats. Although some people think there's no difference between the species, at least nutritionally, there is a difference between the species. Now, Crofagny tried another test. He took men and put them on eggs as a principal source of calories and principal source of protein. And he found that the men required 9% of the total calories and protein when they're eating eggs to just balance out even. That means that they needed at least 9% to just get the protein they needed, and they had no excess at 9%. Now, when he changed their diet to make it 2/3 potatoes and 1/3 eggs, he found that they needed 30% less protein than they needed on eggs alone. The potatoes made the diet much more efficient for man than the eggs alone, so that when we talk about potatoes being inferior to eggs, that certainly doesn't seem to be true with man.